I kindly request every one of you to mute your mics. And if you're having any doubts, you can just message in the chat so that at the end of the session, I'll just check out the chat and reply to you. Or in between, if you are having doubts, you can just unmute yourself and ask. But till that point, I request every one of you to mute the mics. Okay, so in structural design and engineering, in today's topic, we'll be discussing like if you get an architecture model, how we can proceed to structural drawings. That means we need to create different layouts, like column layouts, beam layouts, and all, depending on what criterias we are placing the columns and beams and all. That we'll be discussing today. So today we'll be discussing on objectives of structural engineering, design process, stages in structural design, marking of frame components. So the term structure refers to anything that is constructed or built from different interrelated parts with a fixed location on the ground. The basic function of a structure is to transmit loads from the position of application of the load to the point of support, and thus to the foundation in the ground. Structural engineers are creative innovators. They use maths and science to design structures, solve problems, and shape the world around them. They design, assess, and inspect structures to ensure that they are efficient and stable. So what are the objectives of structural engineer or engineering? The objectives of structural design is to design the structure for stability, strength, and serviceability. It must also be economical and aesthetic. Design of structure must satisfy three basic requirements that are stability, strength, and serviceability. Now, what is stability, strength, and serviceability? Stability to prevent overturning, sliding, or buckling of the structure or parts of it under the action of loads. Strength to resist safely the stresses induced by the loads in the various structural members. Serviceability to ensure satisfactory performance under service load conditions, which implies providing adequate stiffness and reinforcement to contain deflections, crack widths, and vibrations within acceptable limits, and also providing impermeability and durability, etc. Any structure is designed for the stress resultants of bending moments, shear force, deflections, torsional stresses, and axial stresses. If these moments, shears, and stresses are evaluated at various critical sections, then based on these, the proportioning can be done. Evaluation of these stresses, moments, and forces and plotting them for the structural components is known as analysis. Determination of dimensions for these components of these stresses and proportioning is known as design. So now let us go to the design process. Engineering is a professional art of applying science to the efficient conversion of natural resources for the benefit of man. The process of design commences with planning of structure, primarily to meet its functional requirements. The entire process of structural planning and design requires not only imagination and conceptual thinking, but also sound knowledge of science of structural engineering besides knowledge of practical aspects such as recent design codes and guidelines, backed up by ample experience, intuitions, and judgments. Code of practice drawn up by experienced engineers is intended as guides engineers and should never be allowed to replace the conscience and competence of the engineers. Kindly mute your mic, please. Any structure to be constructed must satisfy the need efficiently for which it is intended and shall be durable for its desired lifespan. The design of structures is categorized into two main types, that is functional design and structural design. So now let us discuss about the functional design. The functional planning of a building includes proper arrangements of rooms or halls to satisfy the need of the client, good ventilation and lighting, acoustics, sufficient headroom, proper water supply and drainage systems, etc., and obstructed view in the case of community halls, cinema theaters, etc. Now let us discuss about the structural design. Structural design is an art and science of understanding the behavior of structural members subjected to loads and designing them with economy and elegance to give a safe, serviceable, and durable structure. Principal elements of an RC building frame consists of these following. So everybody will be knowing this. So like slabs to cover the large area, beams to support slabs and walls, columns to support beams, footings to distribute concentrated loads over a large area of the supporting soil. So this is just a schematic diagram showing the load transfer. The load from the slab is transferred to the beams, beams to the columns, columns to the foundation, foundation to the soil. Now comes our main part, that is stages in structural design. So these are the different stages in structural design: structural planning, action of forces and computation of loads, methods of analysis, member design, detailing drawing, and preparation of schedules. So only the first part is unknown to you because in college level we don't study how the structure is planned. But action of forces and computation of loads is studied by, because we know how to calculate the loads and all, and depending upon the loads, what are the forces or what are the stresses coming onto that. That all we have studied. Next comes the methods of analysis. We have studied different methods of analysis, but if you consider a building, we generally do it in any of the softwares. So we can do StatPro, ETAB, STRAP, SAP, SAFE. So many softwares are there. So you can input into that. And designing members. I think all of you have studied the design of all the members and all. If no, also we are having the design in different softwares. In the same analytical softwares itself, we are having design also. And after designing, we have to detail the drawing and then prepare the schedules. So only the first portion, structural planning, is unknown. So that portion we'll be discussing today. So after getting an architectural drawing, how do we start planning the structure? So first of all, positioning and orientation of the columns, positioning of beams, spanning of slabs, layout of stairs, selecting proper types of foundation. So first of all, we have to show the position where the column has to be placed. Then we have to orient it. After that, we go for the positioning of beams, then slabs, stairs, and at the last, we'll select the type of the footing. So first of all, we'll discuss how the columns are positioned. Columns should preferably be located at or near the corners of a building and at the intersection of beams or walls. Since the basic function of the column is to support beams, which are normally placed under the walls to support them, their position automatically gets fixed. The commercial building have normally rectangular pattern of grid type. So you can see the example. So this is a commercial building plan type. Then comes select the positioning of columns so as to reduce bending moment in beams. When the location of two columns are very near, for example, as it occurs when the corner of a building and the point of intersection of walls come very close to each other, then one column should be provided instead of two at such a position so as to reduce the bending moment. So let us see this with an example. So if you see this figure, if you all consider the left side portion of the figure, can anyone tell me where the column has to be placed? That means column has to be placed at P or Q. Where the column has to be placed? Kindly, I request every one of you to type in the chat, P or Q. Good. So many have given a right answer. So I'll explain you what. So consider only the point loads transferred by beams B1 and B2. If only column P is provided, beam B1 will transfer a concentrated load at Q. In such case, beam B3 will have larger span and subject to concentrated load at Q, there will be considerable increase in bending moment. Instead of this, if column is located at Q, the cantilever beam, due to the reaction of B2 at P, will relieve the bending moment in B3, thus providing a cheaper alternative. So what we can simply say is, we know the bending moment of UDL, that is WL square by 8. So bending moment is directly proportional to load, whereas when you consider the length, bending moment is directly proportional to L square. That means if length increases once, the bending moment will increase twice. If the weight increases once, then the bending moment will only increase one time. So you should not consider the weight. Instead of that, you have to consider the length of the beam. So if we come to the right portion, so where should the column be located? It should be located at Q. When you come to the right portion of this figure, there actually you have a marking S. Okay. So in ground level, I'm having a parking portion, and at the top, I'm having a house or residential portion. So where you have to place the column? Is it at S or column at upper story? Definitely by the thing what we have studied, the column should be placed at column or at upper story marking point. But ground portion is parking. So what will happen? Generally in parking areas, we keep the columns uniformly so that while parking and all, it will be easy. So at the ground floor, it should be at S itself. But at the first floor, it should be at column at upper story. So in that case, that the beam from S to column to upper story will act as a cantilever. Okay, so that beam, that cantilever beam should have a higher cross section. So that is not possible. Instead of that, how we can place? So we can place splayed column or column with bracket. So in this case, what will happen? The load from the upper story column will be getting transferred to the ground floor column through the splayed portion. In the same way, we can provide column with bracket also. In that, a portion, an open portion will be there, like you can see it in the figure. So you can provide any of these kinds of columns when you are getting such situations. So in wooden works, these are done, but it is not exactly splayed columns, but we can take it as an example. So these are exactly splayed columns. If you see the figure, in this case, on the top, we are having 3 columns, and at the bottom, you are having 2 columns. So here, splayed column is applied. Next comes avoid larger spans of beams. If center to center distance between the intersection of wall is large, or where no cross walls, the spacing between two columns is governed by limitations on spans of supporting beams, because spacing of columns decides the span of the beam. As the span of the beam increases, the required depth of the beam and hence its self-weight and the total load on the beam increases. The moment governing the beam design varies with the square of the span and directly proportional with the load. In the case of column, the increase in the total load due to increase in the length is negligible as long as the column is short. Therefore, the cost of the beam per unit length increases rapidly with the span as compared to that of column. Columns are also cheaper compared to beams on the basis of unit cost. Therefore, large spans of beams should preferably be avoided for economy reasons. So now I'll have a question. So in this, I'm having a continuous beam AB. So in this, I'm having two options to place the columns. That is, columns at A, C, and B, and column at A, E, G, and B. Where in these two cases, which one is better? First option is A, C, and B. And the second option is A, E, G, and B. Can you please reply in the chat where the column should be placed? Okay, so many of you have given the right answer. In this case, either one column at C can be provided, making ACB two span continuous beams, or two continuous can be provided at E and G to form AB, a three span continuous beams. In the first case, span AC and CB will be larger and the beam has to carry 2 point loads, one at E and the other at G, transferred from secondary beams. This will require heavier section of the beam. In the later case, when the two columns are provided, one at E and the other at G, the beam becomes a three-span beam. The length of the beam is reduced and it is required to carry only one concentrated load, and that too on central span, which further reduces the moment in outer spans AE and GB without appreciable increase in design moments in the portion EG, leading to considerable reduction in the cost of beam. The cost of column is nearly proportional to the load on it. Increase in cost of columns and footings due to provisions of two columns at E and G over the cost of the providing single column at C will be comparatively less than the increase in the cost of beam due to providing single column. Thus, the second alternative is likely to work out to be cheaper. This is more true in case of multi-storied building frames. Avoid larger center-to-center distance between columns. Larger spacing of columns not only increases the span and the cost of the beams, but it increases the load on the column at each floor, posing problem of stocky columns in lower stories of a multi-storied building. Heavy sections of column lead to offset from walls and obstruct the floor area. So can anyone tell me what is a stocky column is? Have you heard about the stocky column? Actually, how a column, okay, fine, you can just hear it. Okay, so how a column actually fails? Yes, definitely it will it will fail in buckling. That means so it will be buckling. So if you have a lesser cross section and the height of the column is more, then it can easily buckle and show the deformation, isn't it? So if the cross section is more, when compared to the height, then what will happen? The buckling will not be happening, just it will crush the column, isn't it? If the cross section is more, what will happen? When you consider to the when the cross section is more, then if you apply a compressive load, then it will not buckle. Instead of that, it will just crush. That type of columns are known as Stokey columns. Now I think it will be clear what is a Stokey column is. So you should not provide any Stokey columns. Okay. Next, the main problem comes is columns on property lines. The columns on property line need special treatment. Since column footing requires certain area beyond the column, difficulties are encountered in providing footing for such columns. In such cases, the column may be shifted inside along a cross wall to make rooms for accommodating the footing within the property line, as shown in this figure, which I have shared. It is just reflecting, yeah, it's reflected. Brackets may be taken out from the column in continuation of cross beams to support walls along the boundary lines. Alternatively, a combined footing or a strap footing may be provided as shown in the second figure. Next comes the orientation of the columns. In that, the first one is avoid projection of column outside wall. According to requirements of aesthetic and utility, projections of columns outside the wall in the room should be avoided, as they not only give bad appearance but also obstruct the use of floor space and create problems in placing furniture flush with the wall. Provide depth of the column in the plane of the wall to avoid such offsets. The problem of column normally occurs in the internal walls since they are usually thinner. Nowadays, 150 mm thick walls are provided to get more floor space. But width of the column is required to be kept not less than 20 mm to prevent the column from being slender. Use L-shaped columns at the corners or T-shaped columns at the intersection of intermediate cross walls. Spacing of the columns should be considerably reduced so that the load on column at each floor is less and the necessity of large sections for columns does not arise. Normally, columns provided in a building are rectangular with width of the column not less than the width of the supported beam for effective load transfer. Restriction on the width of the column necessitates the other side of the column to be larger to get the desired load carrying capacity. Then what are the points to be noted for orientation problems of rectangular columns? We'll be discussing that. The axis of bending is a transverse axis perpendicular to the plane of the bending. The plane of bending is a plane of the frame or member in which loads and longitudinal axes lie and in which deflection profile can be seen. The unsupported length of the member is the length of the member contained in the plane of bending. The effective length of the column is function of unsupported length. The major axis of bending XX is taken as an axis bisecting the depth of the column, or in other words, the depth of the column is contained in the plane of bending. The properties like moment of inertia, deflection, stiffness are calculated about the axis of bending. Okay, now let us discuss about orient the column so that the depth of the column is contained in the major plane of bending or is perpendicular to the major axis of bending. When a column is rigidly connected to a beam at right angles, it is subjected to moments in addition to the axial loads. In such cases, the column should be so oriented that the depth of the column is perpendicular to the major axis of bending so as to get larger moments of inertia and hence greater moment resisting capacity. It will be also reduce L effective by D ratio, resulting in the increase in the load carrying capacity of the column. So if you see this example, it will be clear. The figure shows the portal frame rigidly connected at top by beams B2 and B3 in the lateral direction. Since the bending moment will be very large in the plane of the frame, the depth of the column has been provided in the plane of bending to increase the moment resisting capacity of the column and reduce the L effective by D ratio and increase the stiffness of the column. Increasing the depth in the plane of bending not only increases the moment carrying capacity but also increases its stiffness. Thereby, more moment is transferred to the column at the beam column junction. If the difference in bending moment in two mutually perpendicular directions is not large, depth of the column may be taken along the wall, provided column has sufficient strength in the plane of large moment. This will avoid offset inside the rooms. Next comes the positioning of beams. Provided under walls or below a heavy concentric load to avoid these loads directly coming on slabs. Since beams are primarily provided to support slabs, its spacing shall be decided by the maximum span of slabs. Slab requires the maximum volume of concrete to carry a given load. For residential or office or public buildings, the maximum practical thickness is 200 mm, while the minimum is 100 mm. The maximum and minimum spans of slabs, which decide the spanning of beams, are governed by loading and limiting thickness given in the tabular form which I have shared. It is just getting reflected. Yes, it is reflected. So you can see the slab type and the maximum recommended spans of the slabs. In that below you are seeing two figures. The first one is strong column weak beam design and the second one is weak column strong beam design. So which will be we do? Which type of design we'll do? If we consider the second one, what happens? The column is weaker and the beam is stronger. So in this case, the failure will occur in the column. So the failure will be all of a sudden. If you consider the first one, in that the beam is weak, and the column is strong. So what we can say in that case, the failure will be slow when as compared to the first one. So we generally do practice. Yes, for seismic design, strong column weak beam is a must. And for the normal conditions also, strong column weak beam design is preferred. The next one is avoid larger spacing of beams for deflection and cracking criteria. Deflection varies directly with the cube of the span and inversely with the cube of the depth, that is L cube by D cube. Increase in D is less than increase in span L, which results in greater deflection for large spans. For larger spans, normally higher L by D ratio is taken to restrict the depth from considerations of headroom, aesthetic, and psychological effect. Therefore, spans of beams which require the depth of the beam greater than 1 meter should, as far as possible, be avoided. Yeah, I'll do that, Industry. I'll explain it, okay? Next comes the spanning of slabs. This is decided by arrangements of supports. When the supports are only on opposite edges or only in one direction, then the slab acts as a one-way supported slabs when Ly by Lx is greater than 2. When the rectangular slab is supported along its four edges, it acts as two-way slab for Ly by Lx less than 2. The two-way action of slab not only depends on the aspect ratio Ly by Lx but also on the ratio of reinforcement in the two directions. Therefore, designer is free to decide as to whether the slab should be designed as one-way slab or two-way. This decision may be taken considering the following points. A slab with Ly by Lx greater than 2 is designed as one way, since in that case only one action is predominant. In one-way slab, main steel is provided along the shorter span only and the load is transferred to two opposite supports only. The steel along the longer span just acts as a distribution steel and is not designed for transferring the load but to distribute the load and to resist shrinkage and temperature stresses. According to elastic theory, the distribution of load being proportional to stiffness in two orthogonal directions, major load is transferred along the stiffer short span and the slab behaves as one way. According to yield line theory, the load distribution in two orthogonal directions depends upon the ultimate moment capacity MUX and MUY in these directions. By providing more steel only in short direction, MUX is made By providing more steel only in short direction, MUX is made far greater than MUY and the slab is made to act as one way. Since the slab is also supported over the short edge, there is a tendency of the load on the slab by the side of support to get transferred to the nearer support, causing tension at top along the short supporting edge. Since there does not exist any steel at the top across this short edge in a one-way direction slab, interconnecting the slab and the side beams, cracks develops at the top along that edge. The cracks must run through the depth of the slab due to the differential deflection between the slab and the supporting short edge beam or wall. Therefore, care should be taken to provide minimum steel at top across the short edge support to avoid this cracking. A two-way slab having aspect ratio Ly by Lx less than 2 is generally economical compared to one-way slab because steel along both the spans act as main steel and transfers the load to its four supports. The two-way slab's action is advantageous essentially for large spans and for live loads greater than 3 kN per meter square. For short spans and light loads, steel required for two-way slab does not differ appreciably as compared to steel for one-way slab because of the requirement of minimum steel. Then let us discuss about the spanning of slab is also decided by the necessity of continuity to adjacent slabs. If you see the figure what I have shared, if the slab S1 is to be designed as a slab continuous over the support AB, then it is necessary that slab S2 also spans across AB. If it is designed as one-way slab spanning only in the direction parallel to AB, then the slab S1 will not get the desired fixity or structural continuity over AB as shown in the second figure. In such case, even though full steel is provided at top across AB to cater for the support moment, the beam AB would simply rotate in the absence of any balancing load coming from S2, and S1 will simply act as a slab freely supported on AB. Then let us discuss about just a second. Okay. The guidelines for fixing dimensions of the component parts of a stair are: the rise R should not be more than 200 mm and thread T not less than 200 mm. For residential buildings, the rise may be between 150 mm to 180 mm and thread between 220 mm to 250 mm. For public buildings, the rise must be 120 mm to 150 mm and thread between 250 mm to 300 mm. The sum of the thread plus twice the rise should be between 500 mm to 650 mm. Dependent on its usage and shall be such as to avoid overcrowding. For residential building, the width of the stair should be between 0.8 to 1 meter. And for public buildings, it should be between 1.8 to 2 meter or more. The width of the landing should not be less than width of the stair. For comfortable ascent on stairs, the number of steps in each flight should not be greater than 12. The pitch of the stairway should not be greater than 38 degrees. The headroom measured vertically above any step or below mid-landing should not be less than 2.1 meter. Avoid winders as far as possible. Then comes the choice of footing. The type of footing depends upon the load carried by the column and bearing capacity of the supporting soil. It may be noted that the earth under the foundation is susceptible to large variations. Even under one small building, the soil may vary from a soft clay to a hard moram. Also, the nature and property of soil may change with season and weather, swelling in wet weathering. Increase in moisture content results in substantial loss of bearing capacity in case of certain soils, which may lead to differential settlements. It is necessary to conduct the survey in the area where the proposed structure is to be constructed to determine the soil properties. Drill holes and trial pits should be taken, and in situ plate test load may be performed and samples of soil tested in the laboratory for determining the bearing capacity of soil and other properties. For framed structures under study, isolated column footings are normally preferred except in case of soils with very low bearing capacities. If such soil or black cotton soil exists for greater depths, pile foundation can be an appropriate choice. If columns are very closely spaced and bearing capacities of the soil is low, raft foundation can be alternative solution. For a column on the boundary lines, a combined footing or a strap footing may be provided. So only these are different types of footings, what you can see: column footing, wall footing, isolated footing, combined footing, pile and all. Next, let us discuss about the marking of frames. So let us take an example. So this is the example what I have taken. This is I'm having two plans, ground floor and first floor plan. So in this we are having a servant room. If you consider the ground floor plan, you are having the servant room, driver room, two toilets attached to servant room and driver room, and a storeroom. And in the first floor, if you see the figure, you are having it is completely a bedroom is there on the top, and at the right end you are having a toilet. But if you see the first end, the ground floor and the first floor are starting at the same line. But when you come to the back end of the plan, I think everyone can see the cursor. So this level in the first floor, if you see the wall, that level is matched only to this portion. So the rest are outside. So where we have to keep the columns. So when you come to the front, you can place the column here, here, and here. So that will be sufficient in the case of first floor also. It will support like here at the center as well as here. So when you come to the other side, you can place the column here, but you cannot place it at the outer ends of the toilet. Why? Because if you can, while considering the first floor, that columns will be exposed outside. So you need to provide it inside itself. So you have to provide column here, here, as well as here. So I'll show you the column layout image. So this is the column layout. In horizontal directions, you can place the grids and name it as A, B, C. And in the vertical directions also, you can place the grids and you can name it as 1, 2, and 3. Left side, bottom corner will act as the origin. Then next comes the plinth beam layout. If you consider it, the plinth beam layout, what the thing you have to remember is below every wall, plinth beam should be provided. So below every walls, you have to provide the plinth beams. So this is the plinth beam layout. If you consider this cross mark, there we don't have a wall. But if you don't provide a beam here, what will happen? The junction of this toilet won't be having any fixity. So either we have to extend this beam to this main beam or extend this beam to this main beam. So whichever has minimum length, we'll just increase it to, we'll just support that plinth beam to the main plinth beam. Now we have to prepare the floor beam layout. So that will be prepared using first floor plan. So in that also we are having, if you see this figure, we are having toilet portion here. So it is having only 10 centimeter thick wall. So I'm not considering these two walls for time being. But if you consider the area of this bedroom, that is very heavy. A large area is there. So you need to provide a beam at the center so that the entire slab will be divided into two. So we'll provide a main beam at the center. When you come to this toilet portion, it's only 10 centimeter brick wall is provided. So we can give conceal beam. We can provide conceal beam. So this is the figure showing the concealed beam or ground floor beam layout. And next comes the roof beam layout. In that we are not having any concealed beam cases because on the top we don't have any further construction. So normal main beams are provided at the top. So are you having any queries? This is the thing what I wanted to discuss. We can provide, yeah, Praveen, we can provide partition walls, no problem. But here I have provided 10 centimeter thick walls, so I can give a concealed beam. Basal concealed beam is nothing but what happens is it is just a beam, but it will be compressed in between the slab. That means the depth of the beam will be 12 centimeter itself, but the arrangement of reinforcements will be same as beams. What does that concealed beam do is that concealed beam transfer the load of the wall to the main beams. It won't transfer to the slab. It will be transferred to the main beams. Is it clear, Basil? Actually, I have not practically worked using flat slabs option. So I'm sorry, I cannot give more ideas on practical thing on flat slabs. Beamless slabs is good or not? Beamless slabs, if you can, beamless slabs are okay, but I think from my practical experience, if you have an option, if you can give a beam, it would be better, but you can give without beams also, no problem. What is the difference between conceptual plan and architectural plan? Actually, conceptual plan indicates it is also a type of architecture. It is also a type of architectural plan itself, but the detailed drawing will not be there. You can just create the concept. That means if before telling a story or anything, or before you plan a house for yourself, you'll be having some concept like here the room should be there, or you want these, the elevation should be in such a manner and all. So that is known as a conceptual plan. And architectural plan means, or we can say it as detailed plan. If you create after creating the conceptual plan, you can detail it. Then we can go for detailed drawing. That means all the wall thicknesses, slab, windows, doors, everything will be applied. So that is known as a detailed plan.